Most men remain broke, not because they lack talent, but because they were taught to play a game that doesn't truly exist. They wake up, follow the rules, hustle, sacrifice, obey, yet still find themselves chasing scrap. Look around. The loudest men often beg for attention, but the wealth never lands in their hands. It quietly drifts toward those who never needed to speak, toward the men who don't announce their moves, because they wrote the script everyone else is reading from. This is Rule 1. Master the game, not the crowd. The truth is, most men don't even realize they're playing a game. They chase visibility. They chase applause. But real power doesn't beg to be noticed. It observes. It engineers. It remains hidden until the moment of the clean strike. There is a reason why the same bloodlines have ruled for centuries. There is a reason certain names never appear in headlines, yet own the media that prints them. The Rothschilds never ranted online. The Rockefellers never chased applause. Asian dynasties didn't go viral. They went invisible. They understood something you were never taught. Power isn't about being seen. It's about never being read. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. He who wishes to be obeyed must first learn how to command, but command is not volume. It's calibration. It's the silence of a man who walks into a room and makes others doubt themselves without uttering a word. This kind of power isn't earned through effort. It's built through architecture, through grasping one brutal principle. The crowd is the distraction. Real wealth is built behind the curtain, and here lies what keeps most men stuck. They expose themselves. They explain, they open their hearts and reveal their blueprint. They want to be understood, but every time they speak without purpose, they give away a piece of themselves. Their edge, their unpredictability, their leverage. They believe they're connecting, but in reality they're only making it easier to be controlled. This leads us directly into Rule 2. Build multiple faces but show only one. The man who remains powerless is the man who exposes the same version of himself to everyone. Yet, the elite know better. Every environment demands a different version of power. One face for negotiation, another for seduction. One for war, one for peace. One for solitude. The real self, hidden not because it's fake, but because it's sacred and must be protected, not shared. You were taught that masks are dishonest, and authenticity is strength, but that lesson was never meant to empower you. It was meant to make you predictable. A general never broadcasts his battle plans. A chess master never reveals his next move. The man who moves through the world without selective disguise isn't real. He's naive, and the more people know about you, the more they can exploit it. Your weaknesses, your fears, your blind spots. This is where the elites separate themselves from the expressive masses. They don't reveal everything. They reveal only what builds leverage. They express only what disorients others. They aren't real in the way you expect. They are useful. That is precisely what makes them untouchable. And that brings us to Rule 3. Exploit information. Never share it recklessly. Most men leak. They overshare their plans, their goals, their wounds, their impulses, their next moves, all for the cheap thrill of being understood. But every word spoken without purpose is a map to your destruction. You don't realize it until it's too late, until someone uses your own blueprint to trap you. The powerful man doesn't just stay silent, he listens, catalogs, dissects tone, posture, pauses. Every conversation becomes an X-ray. Every smile is analyzed. Every slip of the tongue is stored. He speaks last and reveals the least. He lets the world wonder, fill in the blanks and expose themselves in the silence he creates. His control doesn't come from expression. It comes from precision. This is what they never teach you. Success isn't about performance. It's about perception. Influence doesn't belong to the loud. It belongs to the unreadable. The man who keeps his silence while others shout. The man who observes while others confess. The man who waits while others lay themselves bare. Control begins with mystery. Wealth begins with concealment. And power begins the moment they can't define you. If you want to rise, stop performing, stop narrating, and start designing. Start distorting. Because if you're not the one shaping perception, you're already living inside someone else's frame. And if you still think wealth is just about money, you've already lost. The real currency is attention. The real weapon is ambiguity. The most dangerous man in the room is not the one who says the most, but the one who knows the most and shows nothing. If you're the kind of man who refuses to stay blind to these power games, like the video and subscribe, because what's coming next, they'll never teach you. When this is done, comment below the rules that struck you hardest. Write them down, engrave them into your consciousness, because every time you remember one, you step one move closer to untouchable wealth. Why your time and energy are making you poor. The average man wakes up and immediately starts bleeding. Not blood, but something far more valuable. His time, his focus, his energy. Every ping from his phone, every half-baked conversation, every smile he fakes, every apology he mutters, just to keep the peace. It all drains him before he even begins his so-called grind. And then he wonders why he's tired, why his efforts produce so little, why no matter how hard he works, wealth never comes. This is Rule 4. Weaponize time like a tyrant. The rich don't spend time. They dominate it. They slice it into blocks, assign it to specific outcomes, and destroy anything that dares interrupt it. They don't live in reaction. They live in ritual, because they understand what the poor never will. Time is not just a resource. It's a battlefield. You either conquer it, or it consumes you. You were raised to balance your life. But balance is a lie. The elites never pursued balance. They imposed structure. Every hour answers to them. Every day is a deployment. Every week is a campaign. When you see a powerful man moving slowly, calmly, without urgency, it's not because he has more time. It's because he has already engineered the battlefield to fight for him. He doesn't run, the systems do. That's why you're exhausted. You think being busy is noble. You think effort equals value. But you've been trapped in a calendar designed by your enemies. You respond to noise. You serve everyone else's priorities. You rest when allowed and grind when told. That's not life. That's obedience. The man who builds wealth does not let his time get stolen in conversations that go nowhere, with people who bring no value, inside routines that burn hours and generate dust. He doesn't chase dopamine from notifications. He doesn't scroll to escape. He manufactures victory, and dopamine is the byproduct. This is where Rule 5 comes into play. Turn people into assets or obstacles, and treat them accordingly. You think your network is support, but most of it is dead weight. People who drain your time, people who demand access, but provide no return. You entertain them out of habit, out of guilt, out of fear of being alone. But the truth is, every hour spent around mediocrity infects your trajectory. The Machiavellian doesn't keep friends. He keeps function. Every person around him is evaluated. Do they produce outcomes? Do they sharpen my discipline? Do they extend my leverage? If not, they aren't enemies, but they are liabilities. And liabilities get cut. He doesn't announce it. He simply vanishes. Because silence isn't just power. It's pruning. Look at the richest men on earth. Do you think they attend every gathering, return every message, entertain every request? No. They disappear. They delegate access. They build layers between themselves and the noise. And as those layers grow, so does their empire. But there's a deeper layer most men never see. It's not just time thieves or social clutter that keep them poor. It's themselves. their inability to regulate the one thing more destructive than distraction: emotion. Which brings us to Rule 6. Emotions are leaks. Seal them. You walk into a room carrying your mood on your face. You reveal tension with a sigh, insecurity with an apology. You flinch under pressure, celebrate too soon, vent to people who aren't building what you're building. In every one of those moments, you're bleeding energy, bleeding leverage, bleeding control. Understand this. Emotion without purpose is a weapon pointed at your own skull. The elite don't suppress their feelings, they direct them. Their rage becomes focus. Their fear becomes foresight. Their sadness becomes silence. They don't react, they respond. They don't flinch, they absorb. And when the moment arrives, they strike not from feeling but from clarity. That's why you never see them shout, panic, or pout. You only see the outer layer, calm, slow, composed. But inside, it's warfare, calculations, pressure valves, delayed responses. Because they know what you still haven't realized. One emotional leak can bankrupt decades of progress. So they seal everything. They create rituals, time for silence, space for reflection. They bleed where no one can see. And when they return, they become unrateable. Because when a man becomes unrateable, he becomes unbreakable. You've been trained to believe honesty is power. But in war, honesty is exposure. In competition, vulnerability is currency for the enemy. And in business, emotion is leverage for everyone, except the one who expresses it. The truth is, more fortunes have been lost from emotional outbursts than from bad deals. More empires have collapsed from weakness shown at the wrong moment than from any outside threat. And more men stay poor, not because they lack ambition, but because their energy is spread thin across things that don't move the needle. If you want to build something indestructible, start here. Ruthlessly protect your time, audit your circle, and most importantly, master your inner world. Because until your energy belongs fully to you, you will always be a slave, even if your bank account grows. The next step isn't about manipulating people. It's about manipulating perception itself. The man who learns to control frames, controls reality. Most men speak first, and lose before the sentence even ends. How the elite control reality without saying a word. They rush to explain themselves, to seek agreement, to ease tension with words. But in every room, before a deal is made or a decision spoken, something deeper has already occurred. A frame has been set. And in that instant, the outcome is already rigged. This is Rule 7. Own the frame, or be trapped in one. The elite don't enter rooms to adapt. They enter to bend reality. They choose their words like weapons. They use pauses like traps. They smile not to comfort, but to disarm. Because they know this. It's not about what's true, it's about what feels dominant. What gets accepted first becomes the lens through which everything else is judged. Watch a Machiavellian mind at work, and you won't see aggression. You'll see gravity when they speak. People don't interrupt when they enter. Silence follows. Why? Because they understand the primal rule of human perception. Authority is assigned to the one who seems least desperate to claim it. Look at the great manipulators of history. Recall the silent advisor to Napoleon. He said almost nothing, but when he did, empires shifted. Or consider a modern example like Ray Dalio in meetings. He doesn't compete for dominance. He defines what dominance means. He doesn't sell ideas. He frames the landscape so his ideas feel inevitable. The weak man argues on other people's terms. The powerful man redefines the terms so others argue inside his design. And when he's truly dangerous, he lets them believe they set the frame while he steers the outcome from the shadow. But frames aren't just verbal. They're psychological architecture. They're built in the eyes, the timing, the stillness. They're not about who speaks loudest but who sets the rhythm. The man who delays his speech, who waits for silence, who responds only after absorbing, he doesn't just control the frame, he is the frame. You want to know why you've been losing? It's not because your ideas are wrong. It's because you've been speaking from inside someone else's world. A frame that defined you before you even opened your mouth. And now, no matter how hard you try, you're reacting, not leading. That's why the next rule matters more than any motivational quote or business hack. This is Rule 8. Feed the mind relentlessly, or be ruled by those who do. The man who doesn't study power will always submit to someone who has. And the man who reads casually, listens occasionally, consumes like a spectator, he might feel smart, but he remains programmable. He is like a soldier without armor, no training, no plan, standing on a battlefield unprepared. The elite don't read for inspiration, they read for weapons. They don't listen to learn, they listen to decode. Every podcast, every page, every moment of reflection becomes an extraction of tactics, patterns of unseen leverage. While the masses chase entertainment, the elite sharpen their edges. They don't wait until wisdom is needed. They embed it before the war even begins. That's how they stay 10 steps ahead. Why they don't panic when markets shift. Why they move like ghosts while others stumble over noise. Their minds have been wired to process chaos as opportunity, to see what others miss. Because while you were watching trends, they were studying architects. While you followed advice, they dissected empires. While you escaped into comfort, they doubled down on mental armament. And now comes the part no one wants to face. Rule 9. Take ruthless, calculated risks or stay a servant forever. The biggest lie you were sold is that safety equals success. That if you avoid loss, you'll somehow rise. That minimizing failure guarantees victory. But the opposite is true. Safety is slavery. A leash around your neck. It's your fear of risk controlling you. The elite don't gamble, they calculate. They simulate worst-case scenarios, build buffers, sharpen fallback plans, and then pull the trigger. They know this. No empire was built by staying comfortable. Every fortune stands on a foundation of strategic exposure. Moments where everything could have collapsed if the mind wasn't prepared. Most men wait for certainty, for permission, for signs, but life never sends signs. It only rewards movement. The Machiavellian doesn't need perfect timing. He needs positioning. He doesn't need assurance. He needs edge. Because fortune doesn't just favor the bold, it punishes the passive. You may think hesitation is responsible behavior, but every time you delay action because it's not the right time, you tighten the chains of your own cage. Every moment you choose low risk over growth, you declare yourself a servant. The men you envy didn't avoid risk. They mastered it. They made bold moves while others froze. They didn't always win, but every strike sharpened their strategy. Over time, their tolerance for risk became a weapon. The average man couldn't comprehend this, understand this. You're not poor because you failed. You're poor. You're poor because you've never put yourself in a position where real failure was possible. You've lived a padded life, and padded lives create padded men. Soft, slow, replaceable. But the moment you rewire that instinct, when you start chasing positioning instead of pennies, when you seek intelligence over comfort, when you command the frame and bet on yourself, even when the odds shake you, you stop being ordinary. Because money doesn't follow caution, it follows gravity. And gravity belongs to the man who bends perception, thinks like a killer and moves before he's told. You've sealed your leaks, you've owned your time, you've learned the game. Now it's time to vanish and still win. Because the final law isn't about domination, it's about immortality. Most men want to be seen. They chase applause, the shoes, the watch, the car that screams louder than their soul ever could. They crave validation because deep down, they fear irrelevance. But relevance is cheap, and what's visible dies. What lasts is never loud. This is Rule 10. Build legacy, not lifestyle. The men who truly rule this world are not the ones on magazine covers. They are the ones whose names are signed into systems, whose decisions echo across generations, without needing their face attached. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the old money European banking clans, they didn't build to impress. They built to remain. Lifestyle burns out. Legacy compounds. And the difference is this. Lifestyle is fed by ego. Legacy is built through structure. The ego buys toys. The strategist buys permanence. The ego decorates the moment. The architect designs for centuries. The man obsessed with status leaves debt. The man obsessed with legacy leaves control. That's why the most dangerous men rarely look rich. They've chosen invisibility, not as a weakness but as a weapon. Because every time you flash wealth, you create a target. But when your wealth is hidden, systematic, untouchable, you can disappear and still win. Legacy doesn't ask for applause. It prints it in the form of systems that feed your bloodline, cash flow that never checks the time, ownership that cannot be taken away, influence that outlives your voice. While others party for attention, the elite build for silence. It's not because they don't care, but because they're focused on being remembered, not by how they looked, but by what they built. You weren't born to impress strangers. You were born to design something that moves even without you. A legacy, machines of power that encode your values into entities, assets, and systems that don't beg. They decide. Now here's the hidden law, the one they almost never say aloud. Because once you understand this, the game stops being about working, chasing, or even earning. It becomes about multiplying control, without ever lifting your voice. This brings us to the bonus rule. Invest strategically, not emotionally. The poor work for money, but the rich weaponize it. They treat capital like an army, every dollar a soldier, either conquering new territory or sitting idle, rot. That's why they don't waste money buying liabilities. Instead, they acquire leverage. They don't gamble. They don't chase hype. They don't flinch at noise. They deploy capital into assets that move without them. Real estate with tenants, businesses with operators, licensing, equity, royalty. They don't trade time for income. They convert wealth into permanence. And beyond that, they build systems that buy back their sovereignty. They invest in things that cannot cancel them, cannot fire them, cannot shame them into silence. They seek assets that whisper their power quietly, even when the world tries to forget their name. While the masses scream over gains and losses, obsess over charts, and compare returns, the elite play a deeper game, one of control, one of detachment, a game where the outcome is not only riches right now, but influence forever. Because here's the truth no one wants to accept. If your wealth dies with you, you never had wealth. You only had an expensive life. Real wealth is what outlives you. Real wealth is what keeps working while you sleep beneath the soil. Real wealth is what your enemies still feel long after they've forgotten your name. That's why the elite disappear, not to hide, but to become immortal, to vanish from the stage, while still writing the script, to detach your identity so completely from your influence, that even in absence, you still dominate. You were taught to chase visibility, but the final transformation demands the opposite: silence, scarcity, system, the ability to walk away, and yet remain fully in control. That is the deepest level of power, when you no longer need to be seen, and yet everything bends effortlessly around your design. So ask yourself, when you die, will the world return to normal? Or will it continue moving precisely in the direction you engineered? Because that is the difference between a consumer and a king. One leaves a gap, the other leaves a machine. Comment below which rule burned the deepest into your memory. Or summarize all. Each law you write down brings you one step closer to sovereignty. Every time you articulate a law, you reinforce it within your mind. And every time you reinforce it, you pull yourself one move closer to legacy.